Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Federal Funding Cuts and Impacts on Iowa's Arts and Culture. This is our second session in the Arts and Culture track for Iowa Ideas 2025, and we're so glad to have you with us today. In this session, we're going to be talking about federal funding cuts to Iowa's arts and culture institutions, how nonprofits are reacting, and the impact it has on Iowans who rely on their programming. My name is Elijah Decius. I'm a features reporter here at the Gazette, as well as the track lead for the Arts and Culture track. I'll be your moderator as we navigate this interesting topic. We have a great panel today, an all Des Moines show it looks like. So first, let's meet our panelists. Up first on our panel is Kelly Baum from the Des Moines Arts Center. Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do there.
Sure. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm the director and CEO of the Des Moines Arts Center, which is a museum, art school, and sculpture park in Des Moines.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Kurt Simmons in Des Moines. Kurt, tell us about the work you do.
Yes, I'm the president and CEO of the Science Center of Iowa. So we are a large-scale museum that serves families and lifelong learners across the state and across the country with interactive exhibits and programs, education programs, and we even have a preschool here as part of our operation.
Great. And last but not least, we have Ben Godard. Ben, who is also in Des Moines. Ben, tell us about what you do there.
Yeah, I'm the executive director of the Varsity Cinema and Des Moines Film. We're a nonprofit film arts organization here in Des Moines. We operate the Art House Cinema, the Varsity Cinema. Since you all are in Eastern Iowa, I think the easiest way to describe it is we're film scene, but in Des Moines.
That's a great shorthand. I love that. Great. Well, let's get started here. Many people may enjoy the programming put on by our museums and cultural institutions, but they don't really know what happens behind the scenes to make it all happen. Give us a lay of the land in terms of funding for your organizations and how you have been traditionally funded in the past. Let's start with Kelly on this one.
Sure. Well, the Art Center, the funding sources are diverse. We rely on investment income from endowments. We rely on about, for our operating budget, 11% derives from earned revenue. So sales in our gift shop, cafe, rentals, the art school, and then 35% of our annual operating budget is contributed revenue. And those are dollars that we fundraise from corporations, foundations, and government sources.
Awesome. Kurt, how about you? What does your funding traditionally look like?
It's very diversified also. Our mix is a bit different. About 80% of our revenue comes from earned revenue, our fees and charges that we associate with our programs in preschool. 20% is contributed income. And a part of that is really important Bravo funding, which is hotel tax funding here in the central Iowa area. And we have a very humble, small endowment, nothing like the Art Center.
Yeah. Has your organization been working to diversify your funding over the years?
Yeah, we have. We have really looked at how we position our fee structure in the market, so we maximize our net position from the programs that we have, and then our donors supplement those programs where, especially audiences can't afford those programs. They're able to create scholarships and help us produce new programs for schools and visitors.
Awesome. And Ben, tell us about the landscape for your funding as well. I'm sure folks are, since you analogize to film scene, that's a pretty popular thing here. I'm sure folks would love to hear how you make that happen over there.
Yeah, well, I think diversified is definitely a key word here for all of us. We make about 2/3 of our revenue comes from earned revenue sources. So that's primarily your box office, your concessions, those kind of like traditional movie theater revenue streams. Which leaves about 1/3 of our budget, which is from our contributed revenue sources. The largest portion of that is actually our membership program. A lot of our folks, that's how they kind of support us on an ongoing basis, is that higher and higher membership levels, similar to what you might see in like, public media, things like that. And then other contributed sources include other, grants and things like that. Like Kurt, for us here in Des Moines, Bravo is a fantastic supporter and generally our largest single grant piece of that pie.
Awesome. Thank you. We've had some changes this year, haven't we? Earlier this year, federal funding institutions like the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities started to make some pretty major changes. Tell us about the scope of these changes and how your organizations were notified about these cuts. Let's start with Kurt on that one.
Yeah, we have participated in federal grants through the Institute of Museum and Library Services program, IMLS. And we had just been awarded a grant last year, about $165,000 to build stronger relationships and figure out how to better serve the Latinx community here in Central Iowa. So while that fell directly in the definition of DEI kind of projects, so we kind of knew that was going to be challenged. But the reality for us is that we are looking at these new audiences because they are the growing population. When I look at this from a business perspective, I need to figure out how to grow my attendance from these emerging audiences. Our traditional audience, family of 2 adults and 2 kids, that is shrinking. We're seeing birth rates drop in that category. So as a business person, I've got to figure out where to get more market from. And that's what the grant was going to help us do. And we just simply got an email that said, your grant has been rescinded. We had also applied for another IMLS grant this year to fund the kind of project that these federal funds often support. It was going to help us update, modernize our animal care facility. We have live specimens here. And that's not a very sexy project for donors. It's hard to find operating dollars to do that kind of thing. And we got notice that there wasn't sufficient funding anymore to carry forward with those programs. So that's been the direct impact on us.
Yeah. Kelly, let's go to you next. How were you guys notified about this, and tell us how it's impacted things immediately?
Well, we were in a slightly different situation. We were in the process of opening an exhibition called Light Within Ourselves, Haitian Art from Iowa. This exhibition was funded in part through a grant that originated with the NEH. And something important to know about grants from the NEH and NEA is that they are reimbursement based. And so you only receive your award after you have completed the work, not before. So in the case of this exhibition, which celebrated an amazing and enormous collection of Haitian art that exists in Iowa at the Waterloo Center for the Arts, the largest collection of Haitian art outside of Haiti is here in Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa. And the Art Center was really proud to partner with the Waterloo Center for the Arts and Grinnell College on an exhibition and research project related to Iowa's collection of Haitian art. And this was a project funded in part through a grant that originated with the NEH. We were a few weeks away from opening the exhibition. I would say 75–80% of the actual work had been done, the money had been spent, and we received an email letting us know that the grant was canceled. The money had disappeared, basically because the NEH more or less didn't exist any longer. We canceled 1 or 2 programs, but otherwise we were determined to open the exhibition, and the project is planned. We made up the difference. In the end, we were able to secure reimbursement for funds already expended on the project. So we lost only a portion of what we had been promised. So in our case, we were lucky.
Yeah. Lucky is a very relative word these days, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Ben, tell us about how it's impacting your organization here. You've mentioned Bravo, that's a big source for you guys, but federal funding has a way of kind of trickling down. There's a lot of, it's a very pass-through thing by nature. So tell us how it's, kind of impacted you just in these first few months here.
Yeah, well, I mean, the most direct and specific way is with our National Endowment for the Arts grant, and we receive funding through their media project for the arts. And like everyone else here, we got an email, boilerplate email that went to everyone who received that grant saying that that program and our award had been canceled because, and then it listed the new priorities of the president, which of course have never been something that would be put on something like that before. And the one thing that I always think it's important to highlight when we talk about this is, this wasn't saying we're changing the priorities for this funding program like going forward. This was this grant which you applied for almost a year ago under this set of principles, and have been, as Kelly mentioned, doing that programming, and we were going to reimburse you for. That's not there anymore. So it was really kind of a rug being taken out from under it, just structurally, even beyond what you might think about what the priorities of the organization should be. But Elijah, kind of to your question there, I mean, that's one of our larger concerns. I mean, for us personally, our NEA funding was about 2% of our overall budget. So it was, it was significant. It wasn't like we didn't, go out of business the day after, or anything like that. But there are a number of funding things that I guess folks receive, and they might be given out by city, state, etc., but they're actually appropriating federal funds. So that's kind of an ongoing concern. Is are there other areas that we're going to see this pop up?
Yeah,
Elijah, I would add also that we're all experiencing direct impact from rescinded funds for projects. But in addition to that, we benefit from secondary investment. So NEA might invest in a larger museum that's producing an exhibit or an education program that ultimately gets shared with us for free or for a reduced cost. So that's an indirect impact, but has a real loss factor for us when I think traveling exhibits, for example, are going to start drying up a little bit. And the third area that I think we benefit from investment from federal funds is in the growth and learning in our fields. So the field of museology has really benefited from these federal grants because of the research that goes into these grants that's shared throughout the field. It helps us all understand how to do a better job of how to reach visitors and help them have a great experience.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point, and that is, just how static this kind of funding has been for decades, how much stability it has provided our institutions. As that is, very suddenly ripped out from under our organizations, what are some of the other, essentially side effects or kind of trickle-down effects that you think we're already seeing or that we're going to see? Kelly, I'd love to hear from you on that one.
Sure. I think the impact will be different depending on the size of the organization. So I would say in the case of the Art Center, we don't rely extensively on grants from the NEA or the NEH. Some of those funds, as Kurt mentioned, and Ben too, sort of pass through the State Arts Council, Humanities Iowa, who distribute federal funds. And we would receive, I would say every year, every other year, we'd receive a healthy grant to allow us to realize an exciting and ambitious project or exhibition that welcomes more audiences into the institution, provides them with a more robust, and thrilling experience. And so for us, it begins to curtail our ambition and our ability to innovate, to create. I would say it also puts pressure on our free admission model. So I mentioned earlier that we rely only about 11% on earned revenue. We don't sell tickets to our programs, lectures, workshops, film screenings. Admission to our galleries is free, but free admission for guests is not free for us. So we lose thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in earned revenue because we are free. And we have to make up the difference through fundraising. So the loss of $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, in federal funding compounded over the years puts pressure on our free admission model. And that means fewer people could be able to visit the Art Center. For smaller organizations, a larger portion of their operating budgets will rely on federal funds, either direct or indirect. Huge, and for them, it's existential. And these are smaller organizations outside of the big cities and rural parts of the state of Iowa.
Yeah, and as I understand it, those smaller organizations, they're we might not think of them first, but are they, a majority of what exists in Iowa? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on something. You said it's going to maybe discourage some ambition here. I want to explore that a little bit more. There's this conception, some of the NEA and the NEH and other grants were tied to diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. But I think there's a conception that most of the things being cut are related to DEI. And I want to get your input on that. What are some of the other things, the other types of programming that are kind of being swept along with this?
Elijah, would you like me to answer, or
Sure, yeah,
or
go
Kurt,
ahead.
maybe? Okay. Oh, sorry. Did you say
Yeah,
me?
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I spoke over you. So some of the funds, and these would be pass-through funds, go to operating expenses. So they support not just projects and exhibitions, but general operating expenses. So that would be everything, including free admission. With regard to ambition, I'm not sure that everyone listening, that all of our guests understand just how expensive it is to mount an exhibition, to bring a film to Des Moines. There are enormous expenses around labor, resources, materials attached to exhibitions. And the bigger, the more exciting, the more ambitious, the more expensive. And so again, the loss of even $20,000, $50,000 really begins to mean you're doing less and doing less for the people of the state.
Yeah.
And Elijah, I'll add that one of the real losses here especially with the smaller organizations is, this isn't easy money to get. You've got to go through a very rigorous process to apply for a federal grant. And they ask very difficult questions. So it helps smaller organizations increase their professionalism by addressing the questions and the criteria for grant making in the grant process. It elevates their professionalism. That's a big loss to not have that financial support to be able to help those grow. And I'd add, while we represent film, arts, and science here, culture, IMLS is also a huge funder of libraries, and especially rural libraries receive significant amounts of their operating revenue from IMLS. And I'm very concerned about the losses we're going to see in rural libraries across Iowa.
Yeah. And IMLS funds some similar kinds of projects of the type that are hard to fundraise for: preservation of archives, accessibility initiatives, introducing universal accessibility into institutions. They had been awarding some really exciting grants to museums and institutions to preserve their archives, which are also the archives of the people of that community. They were funding initiatives to make exhibitions, programs, and spaces universally accessible. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants that have just disappeared overnight, not tied to DEI initiatives, but really historical memory, community, and belonging.
Yeah.
And I was just going to kind of piggyback on some of what Kelly had said there. One way we always kind of frame this for our audience is that our contributed revenue is what allows us to do our most mission-driven programming. So if we're, bringing a film to Des Moines that would not come to Des Moines otherwise, that is not going to have a big audience, but the 18 people that see it, it's going to have a huge impact on them. Or we're doing a community partnership with an organization that's going to bring tremendous value, but not make nearly enough money to cover its cost. We love doing those things. That's kind of our most mission-driven work, and it's those contributed revenue sources that allow us to do that. So as the federal funding or really any other contributed revenue sources go away, it makes it harder for us to do some of that more adventurous programming that is not going to generate the kind of earned revenue support that other types of programming will. And I think that's just even more magnified in maybe for smaller organizations and smaller communities, particularly if they don't have an earned revenue component, to go along with those contributed sources.
Absolutely.
And then we typically bring in at least one traveling exhibit a year, which is produced by another museum or a private entity. And I really can't think of one exhibit that we've had in the last 20 years that was produced in the US that was not underwritten to some level by a federal agency. So it's critical to the underpinning of the support we get from each of our industries to keep producing content.
Yeah. We have a question from our audience here. I think it would be good to put in now. They asked, generally, how critical is Bravo to the success of arts organizations in the Des Moines metro area?
Very.
They're wanting to hear, they're wanting to hear thoughts on, if it might be feasible for Cedar Rapids to create a similar organization.
Yes, they should. And I'll just kind of frame for folks, especially in Eastern Iowa, who may not be as familiar. Bravo Greater Des Moines, they take a portion of the hotel motel tax that's collected, and the greater is a very important part of that. It's Greater Des Moines, so it's throughout many of our kind of surrounding suburban and other nearby area communities. And that is all sort of held in reserve for arts organizations. And then Bravo is the organization that distributes those funds to arts organizations. One of the other amazing components of it is it's for general operating. It's not, you don't have to come up with this is a specific program we're doing for this. So they really kind of follow the work you're doing and will support that on an ongoing basis. I know when I'm at national conferences and things, and I mention Bravo, like jaws hit the floor, like people cannot believe we have a source like this. So, it is, I think, invaluable to those of us here in Des Moines.
Yeah. I want to get a snapshot of the gravity of this moment. How rare is it to see a shift in funding that is this seismic, with grants being suspended, with little to no notice, or maybe perhaps even retroactively? I'm not sure if that's happened, but Kelly, let's start with you on that one. I saw some nodding there.
Yeah, I can't think. I'm not new to arts and culture. I'm new to the role of director and CEO. I cannot remember a moment like this in the past where grants that have been previously awarded have just disappeared, and entire institutions are kind of silenced. Although there was a moment in the visual arts in the 1980s and 1990s called the Culture Wars, when the NEA in particular was under pressure, under fire, became very politicized. At that time, the NEA awarded direct grants to artists, and artists were making forms of art that certain members of Congress didn't like, and NEA became a target. And so there have been calls to dismantle, defund NEA, NEH in the past, but so far they've survived thanks to bipartisan support. But I can't think of another moment exactly like this one. Ben and Kurt, I don't know if you can.
No, I agree, Kelly. And this intricate system that has been created over decades, slowly, methodically, and the federal funding has been an important part of that. And to have such a big chunk of that underpinning just pulled out so quickly and at such a large scale sends ripples through the whole system. So we're still kind of figuring out what that means and how we've got to adjust and modify other parts of our operations and each of our endeavors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never gotten an email before that said the president is canceling your grant and the new priorities for arts in America include AI literacy and celebrating America's 250th anniversary. I mean, it was just, it's just bizarre. And also, as Kelly mentioned, just structurally, essentially rescinding grant funding that's gone out is kind of unheard of. I know I kind of stay in contact with Americans for the Arts advocacy organization that kind of is in our sector. And, they have a whole page up on just all the various presidential, orders and things like that and kind of how to respond to them. And, the tough thing is a lot of these things, they might get announced in an email or something like that. There might be court challenges. It's very hard to understand maybe where these things are at from a legal standpoint. But one of their overarching messages is that, for any of us who might accept some of this funding, you have to accept the possibility that it could be, you could be sort of retroactively found to not be in compliance on something like this and have to, give funding back. Well, that makes it, essentially impossible, I think, as an organization to accept funding that, you may potentially have to give back. But of course, I think that's a very intentional, chilling, part of this whole thing.
Yeah. And, let's assume that, for the sake of example, that things go back to normal, so to speak, in the near future. Tell me what effects you think this is going to have in terms of discouraging use of future funding. Can museums afford to, take that risk that the funding they've applied for and they've been granted may not be there when the project is finished? Kelly, let's start with you on that one.
Sure. And I wanted to say just very quickly is that I don't have the exact numbers, but NEH, NEA, IMLS accounted for such a teeny tiny portion of the overall kind of federal budget. I mean, is it less than 1%? It's such a small, I mean, and funding had been, I think, reduced pretty consistently over time, but the money that we're talking about comprehensively that was shared with museums, organizations, and the like was very, very small, within the context of the entire budget, but had an enormous impact on individual organizations. So we're talking about very few, the percentage of tax dollars from any one taxpayer is actually quite small, but has an enormous positive impact on arts organizations. Moving forward, I think organizations will, it's hard to know which of these agencies still exist in what form. I think that institutions are going to have to accept some risk, and because the dollars have to come from somewhere. There has to be a backup plan. There has to be an effort to further diversify. I think there are some other, we might get to this later, but kind of structural issues that will need to be addressed. Dollars are not infinite, and the solution isn't going to be just continuing to diversify sources of revenue. I think that nonprofits will have to imagine how they exist in the world. There might need to be efforts to consolidate. Nonprofits have really proliferated recently, and this puts stress on individual donors as well as foundations. And so how can we function differently? How can we exist differently as a nonprofit landscape?
Yeah. How have your organizations reacted to this? How are you guys staying afloat this year? And I know most of you plan years in advance. So, where do we go from here? Ben, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, for us, NEA funding is just 2% of our kind of, and regular funding. So, to that end, NEA funding in and of itself, not a catastrophic loss. But I guess what I would say is that, there's variability in all of our diversified funding sources. And frankly, NEA funding had been among the more kind of stable of those, because these programs had not changed much over time. And so it was something where, yes, you were applying annually, but it was, relatively easy to kind of pencil in, I think we're going to kind of get this amount there. So, the short version of how do we replace the loss of any funding sources? Well, we just try to get, earn more from our other existing funding sources. But it's not like we're not already doing that, right? It's not like we're not already trying to get the most we can out of our earned revenue sources. And we're not, scouring the other available, grants and things as well. So, so it does become a challenge in that regard. I think my bigger concern is just if any of the whether it's the priorities of this change, or it's just kind of the, just even the culture around, how, grants can be kind of, taken away or restructured, on the fly, to see something like that those things become more pervasive. I think that's where it would start to reach a level for us that it would, be more kind of maybe institutionally threatening.
Yeah. And I would add, Elijah, that even though we're talking about small percentages of each of our revenue lines coming from this, unlike the private sector, which might have a 15 or 20% profit margin, and they can adjust in there, every nonprofit operates very, very close to break even. So when you're talking about something as small as even a 1 or 2% impact, especially if it is fairly steady, regular, it has a huge impact on nonprofits.
Yeah. A lot of nonprofits have turned to the public in the midst of these drastic changes. Tell me about the response you've seen from your donors and just the general public as you try to navigate these uncharted waters here. Start with Kurt on that one.
Yeah, we fortunately have seen some positive reaction from some donors and foundations and stuff as a quick reaction to what's going on, but they're very clear that that's not a sustainable reaction to what's going on. There are finite dollars out there. Every nonprofit's immediate reaction to losing federal money, losing any money, is we'll go raise more. Well, the resource pie is not getting larger on that front. And as Kelly indicates, we need to look at some systematic changes in how we operate as individual organizations and as an industry, frankly. So it's a big challenge. The private sector cannot make up for the losses that we are incurring from federal grants.
Yeah. Kelly, do you concur with that? Is increased reliance on private donors a viable part of this?
No, I don't think so. I would say that I arrived at the Art Center 2.5 years ago, and we began a very concerted and strategic effort to write more grants to private foundations, national foundations, like the Terra Foundation for American Art, the Luce Foundation, and the Art Center didn't have a tradition of applying for, a robust tradition of applying for grants from private foundations to support our exhibitions and programs. And we had already started to do that and had seen some success. We also applied for a successful grant from the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation to support energy upgrades, a sustainability initiative attached to a renovation project. So we're going to lean into that. So more outreach to individuals, more outreach to private foundations. I will say that those same private foundations, they are now seeing an uptick in applicants, a dramatic increase in applicants. So again, the dollars are the same, but the demand is greater, the competition is greater. And so I think, as Kurt said, there's no way to make up for the difference. We're also, as part of our strategic plan, trying to maximize earned revenue as much as possible. But again, we're talking about very small margins. There's only so much you can do with earned revenue without making your entire institution inaccessible to people from all backgrounds and walks of life. So.
Yeah, and accessibility is such an important part of what you all do as
absolutely, yeah.
That's a lot of why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from the audience. Somebody asked, is there anyone or any institution monitoring which Iowa arts or cultural organizations are closing due to federal cuts? Have we seen any closure impacts yet?
I'm not aware of any yet. I know that there are a lot of threats out there, and specifically to the question, I don't know if anyone is really tracking that. If I'd say maybe the Arts Council might be looking at that, but I have no idea.
Okay. Let's get back to the kind of the permanent impacts to expect here. With this change in political winds, is this the start of a new era for arts and culture nonprofits?
I'm going to say no, optimistically. And I'll say also that, and this maybe gets a little bit at the last question. We did when our NEA grant funding was rescinded, we went very public with a campaign about that and said, hey, this happened to us. We're not changing our values. Our mission remains the same. And, we asked our audience to, step up and support that. And, the donations we received in, it's under 2 weeks, more than exceeded our NEA award, annual NEA award, which is great. Now, that's not necessarily an annual model, right, to do something like that. But I think that there was value in letting our community know that even if we're seeing the kind of political winds blow this way, it's not going to change what we do. And just speaking for our organization, highlighting diverse voices is one of our key kind of programming principles. And frankly, there would be no reason for us to exist were we not doing that, because, we are an arts organization that is in an area where there are also for-profit arts organizations, right? You can go see movies at like an AMC theater. So, why support a nonprofit cinema organization? Well, it's because we're helping you see and experience things that you don't see elsewhere. And so, that's never going to change for us. And so the question is just, is that valued enough by our local community, by government agencies, by corporations, in order for us to sustain our operations and do what we do? And I hope it will continue to be. This is obviously a change to that, but we kind of stand firm on that mission. So either it's not going to change, or we're going to go away. Those are the two options.
Yeah. And I really agree with what Ben said, and I will add this summer we hosted an exhibition, paintings and sculptures by a Dominican-born New York-based artist, Firle Baez, was on view from June until early September, and our gallery attendance jumped 30% over last year, and so 30% over last year, and that was due in large part to this exhibition devoted to really extraordinary paintings and sculptures by a Dominican-born artist. And so the Art Center, is committed to broad, universal, inclusivity and diversity. And I would say that the community is also interested in and invested in that, as witnessed by attendance at Firle's exhibition.
Yeah. I think a common narrative that I've heard pushed politically and, even among everyday folks is that nobody cares about diverse voices anymore. Nobody cares about DEI anymore. Ben and Kelly, tell me more about how you see the public responding to diverse voices. Do they still value that? Ben, are you still seeing, value from are you still seeing demand from the public for these diverse voices in, your ticket numbers, for example?
Absolutely. Similar to Kelly, we see our audience really respond to those things. And we have an annual survey that we're a part of, kind of a national art house survey, where we receive data just from our audience. And that's one of the main reasons they tell us that they support us, is because we bring that diversity of programming to them. So we're frankly not seeing that at all, aside from, in one email from the NEA.
Yeah.
And I'm just not sure how to define diversity, because we do so many things for so many audiences. And when we do something, about a culture or a film, it's not just for that ethnic audience. It's for others to come together to have a different perspective, hopefully have conversations about that, some dialogue, and elevate the opportunity to learn, not just from the film or the exhibit, but from conversations with each other. We run organizations that are not just about things on the wall. We are community centers where people come together to exchange ideas in safe spaces. That's really, really important. I don't know how to define that in terms of diversity, but in a challenged time when we see neighborliness quotients decreasing in Iowa, having organizations like ours are really an important tool to building conversations, understanding, and building common direction for the community.
Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit late to be having this conversation, but what is the value of diversity? What do we get from having diverse voices, even if we're not a part of that community? As Kurt said, it serves not just that community, but it serves us all. Kelly, I'd love to hear from you on that one.
And as part of the Art Center's mission, which we redefined at the end of last year, we seek to build creative and empathetic communities. And we also seek to bridge distances and differences. And I think it's by bridging distances and differences that you build creative and empathetic communities. So the goal is empathy, understanding, and communication. And I think that those are the basis of just well-being. It's my definition of humanity. It's crucial to a functioning democracy. And so diversity, broad-based diversity is the building block towards greater understanding.
Yeah, and diversity is not, for us, it's not about demographics per se. It's about presenting diverse ideas and perspectives and engaging our audiences to learn more and have conversations about those different ideas. I mean, some would even say some parts of science are diverse ideas. So the diversity net can be cast pretty broadly.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. All of us probably remember a time when every corporation had a boilerplate statement on their DEI efforts that have since been taken down very quickly. Sponsoring these kinds of efforts for corporations used to be as routine as sponsoring Little League for a small business. How has this new political environment had a chilling effect on our programming and what we are feasibly able to do? Or do you see that happening in the future? Ben, I'd love to hear from you on that one.
Well, I guess I don't know. And I it certainly didn't affect us. We didn't change any, we didn't remove anything about our mission or our commitment to, equity and inclusion from our, website or anywhere else. I know that there were institutions and corporations who maybe, chose to do that in response, I guess, to what they thought the maybe prevailing, political winds were. I mean, I think that's unfortunate. I think that doesn't speak to a lot of commitment to the mission of your organization. But I don't know how prevalent that was, and I don't know how much we're going to, see that, continue. So I hope it, I hope it wasn't prevalent, and I hope it doesn't continue. But I think that's a little bit, to be determined.
Absolutely. I want to talk about our mindset on arts and culture institutions. A lot of us think of it as, a day at the museum, a form of entertainment, something nice to have. And that's great. I'm not knocking that. But how do we make art and how do we convey the value of art to the public as something that is integral to our lives and not just something nice to have? Kelly, let's start with you. I'm going to pick on you a little bit.
Well, I think about access to the arts, and in the case of the Art Center, I'm talking not just about kind of consumption of art, but the making of art. So one of the things that makes the Des Moines Art Center unique is that it is a museum and an art school. So you can come to the Des Moines Art Center and see extraordinary works of art by artists from all over the world. The same artists who are at the Met, MoMA, Art Institute of Chicago. You can also take a class in our art school for a very reasonable fee, rigorous but accessible class taught by a professional artist for a small investment, scholarships available. And I have heard from so many people, we've educated at this point, maybe 4 or 5 generations of Iowans in our art school. They come back again and again. Some have been taking classes for years, their kids, grandkids. And what they find in the art school is not just a skill. They're not just building a skill. They are touching and building a community. And it brings them enormous satisfaction and well-being to be in a space where they can exercise their minds and their creativity. And it really goes to what makes them human, and what makes them feel like a whole human. And that is the conjunction really of creativity and community. So I would say that for a lot of people who come to the Art Center, it is not just education. We are an institution of learning, but also well-being. Social, emotional, psychological, and even physical well-being. We know that emotional and psychological well-being are tied to physical well-being.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of evidence that participating in the kind of programs and exhibits that we have elevates that sense of well-being.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd also add one of the values that I really see nonprofit organizations having is our volunteer spirit. Having volunteers from all stripes of life come together and work to a common cause. It's one of the few places left today where you can get together with folks, work on something you're passionate about, be part of a big team, and politics doesn't enter into it. It's tapping into building community and building relationships, which is really critical today.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, along those lines, we just continually talk about how, our mission is more about being a community space than it is about the art itself. And in our annual survey data, we just, repeatedly have folks telling us how much they value our contribution to their quality of life, how we're a place that they feel safe, a place that they feel they can gather in community. And, that's incredibly valuable. And, it's not as yes, the art is kind of, we're gathering around the art form to do that, but it's that gathering in that community space that people value as much, if not more, than the art itself.
Yeah. Do you think that, as we're talking about funding a lot, how funding is getting more difficult. Is it possible that we could lean into the strength of this community building that's inherent to your missions as an added value? Is that something that could maybe prompt people to want to step up to the plate a little bit more?
I think so. I think as we really disclose more of this role that we play in community building beyond the objects that we display, we show, or the exhibits that I bring in, people really need these third spaces, these places that are safe, that they can have a great experience with their group, exchange ideas, challenge ideas, and even interact with other people in the community that they may not have known before. It becomes a really freeing opportunity for folks to be in community together.
Absolutely. Ben, I want to go back to you on one of my last questions. How do we get into this? How do we convey this mentality that the arts are not just something nice to have, that they're integral to our lives? People love films. Maybe that's an easier task for you than some other folks. But tell me how you do that with your donors and your funders.
We talk about it all the time. If you read one of our grant applications, you would see, you would really see us focused on that role we have as a community space. And again, we hear that from our audience as well. That's what they, consistently comment on about us. So I think it's already there, and I think we, continue to talk about it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of find people are largely already aware of that. And it's what they kind of already appreciate about what we do.
Absolutely. We've already talked a little bit about the kinds of institutions that will be most impacted by this. I want to touch on the people who will be most impacted by the changes to our landscape today. Kelly, tell me who you see being impacted most by this. What type of person will be impacted by these cuts and these changes to programming?
I think it will be communities in rural pockets and corners of the state. I think that the larger institutions or even small to mid-sized institutions in Iowa's bigger cities will be the communities in the cities will be better insulated from the changes, but smaller communities in rural portions of the state will just, there aren't many, there are already relatively few options and institutions in those places, and their margins are much smaller, more dependent on direct or indirect grants from NEA, NEH. And so those are the communities, and they're already under-resourced compared to the communities in the cities. They are going to feel the impact more quickly and more harshly.
Yeah,
I would agree, and I think early tenure organizations, grassroots organizations that are filling a new niche, who were able to receive some modest little grant money from pass-through grants from NEA and NEH through the state, which helped them kind of scale up a little bit and create a little more traction for their programs and their growth. We're going to see a reduction in new startups and grassroots kind of organizations that have always filled little gaps for us.
Absolutely. Where do we go from here? How can Iowans help with your missions?
You can send a check to.
I would say. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh no, I mean, I guess, I think just continuing to participate or support us in any way they can. So for us, we love for people just to come visit as a patron. Come see a movie. If they like it, come back again. And then if they find, yes, I do find community here, I find meaning in the work I'm seeing here, and I have the capacity to make a donation or become a member or get involved as a volunteer or whatever it may be, those are all the things that they can do. And so I really don't want to get too locked into the doom and gloom that these kind of federal sources maybe decided that we're not going to prioritize this, because what we're seeing is that our community prioritizes us as much or more than ever. So there's still all those other ways that they can show us that support.
Absolutely. Kurt, how can
I agree.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry. I was going to reiterate, just showing up and visiting the Art Center, attending a lecture, joining us for an exhibition opening, free. It's free. Participating as a patron, a guest, maybe having lunch in our cafe, working in the store. A membership to the Art Center for an individual is $35. And there are benefits attached to that membership, but what that $35 gift does is it protects free admission for folks who couldn't, say, afford a ticket or a membership. And so memberships at the Art Center are scaled, and entry level is very modest. But that $35 can have a tremendous impact and protect both the institution and our free admission model.
Yeah, I support all those comments. Participate is key. I'd also add, educate yourself a little bit about the organizations in your community. You would be surprised the many, many different programs that nonprofit arts and cultural organizations are putting together, many of them free. And Ben just had a great event with Metropolis Film with live music. You know, where are you going to see that? But you may not know about that unless you go to our websites, educate yourself a little bit, look at volunteer opportunities to get more involved if it's something you're interested in. It's just about participating.
Yeah. I was thinking about, obviously money is great. We'll take money from our donors, but added value ways to participate that maybe don't involve money. Volunteering is a good one. Are there any other things that come to mind on that end?
Well, Elijah, I'm going to jump in, and this is a slight detour, although I'll connect the threads. But I also encourage people. I mean, we represent, the three of us, relatively large. Institutions in Des Moines and in the metro. We are just three of a dozen plus large, mid-sized, small, experimental arts organizations. And so I really encourage everyone listening to study what's out there and support, really look for those emerging arts organizations, those grassroots organizations. They need support just as much, if not more, than the larger organizations. So, and those are the organizations that might be run by a woman. Maybe they were founded by a person of color, by a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so really study, support, and patronize, buy a ticket. Because I think that those organizations too will be the ones that have the most trouble surviving this new funding landscape.
Yeah. Well, we just have a few minutes here, so I'm going to put out the last question. How critical is it for Iowans to build a culture that values the arts, regardless of the funding logistics? Could that kind of culture help mitigate damage or challenges in the future?
Yes. And Elijah, I love the way that you phrase that around Iowans building that, because I think that's part of the lesson here is that you can't just rely on existing sources or sources that would have been out there to, build and support these things. But just by the same token, just because some existing source doesn't support it anymore doesn't mean it goes away. So, we have the power to, speak up and support the organizations, the institutions, the art forms that we want to support. The scale to which those are sustainable, maybe that'll change. But as long as people stand up and say, I want this, and as long as there's organizations, big or small, that are, willing to do the work and provide that, these things will persist.
Absolutely. Kurt and Kelly, any last words on that?
There's lots of evidence that what we do in the culture sector really helps support quality of life in communities. We are an important part of attracting new work talent, and retaining them to build a community that folks feel is vibrant, that has some opportunities for them to enjoy, learn, and participate and volunteer. We're an essential part of what it takes to create a great community.
Absolutely. Kelly, I'll give you the last word if you have anything to say.
Oh, sure. I like to say that every great state needs great museums and cultural organizations. They really are key to making a place one where folks want to move and stay and live. I will also say that the arts and culture, they generate enormous positive economic activity in the state. We employ tens of thousands of people. We generate tax revenue. Our budgets are all spent locally and within the state primarily. So we are part of the economic engine of Iowa. And if we disappear, hundreds of thousands of dollars of economic activity disappear as well.
Absolutely. As we wrap up here, I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone giving us an important glimpse into your world and how you're working to broaden our horizons. The arts and museums are not often thanked enough for the role that they play in the way we think and how we make the world a better place. So Thank you to all of our attendees for watching today, and a big thank you to our wonderful panelists for lending their ideas and expertise this morning. Next up in our arts and culture programming today is Hedge Your Bets, a look at how casinos impact the art scene, which starts at 11:45. Happy Iowa Ideas and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.